Hello, and welcome back to Philosophy 1050, an introduction to philosophy. This is Lecture 5. In this lecture, we'll be covering Plato's dialogue titled Crito. Crito is set in the aftermath of the Apology, which we covered in our last lecture, where Socrates is charged with several crimes and sentenced to death. Crito, one of Socrates' close friends, comes to visit Socrates in the early morning inside of his jail cell. His whole goal here is to convince Socrates to escape. Socrates, however, is having none of it, and gives Crito several reasons why it wouldn't be okay or good for him to escape. To start off, Crito gives a few reasons why Socrates should escape. One of them is, what will people think? People's opinions. Oh, jeez. Oh, man, that was quite the bird part. Here we go. Opinions. People's opinions of Crito would be affected because, after all, if he lets Socrates die in his jail cell or be executed, then basically Crito abandoned Socrates. So what will people think? Another reason that Crito gives is that Crito has plenty of resources. He has enough money and, connections that he could get Socrates out of jail and help him escape. So it's possible. Also, he wants to say there are plenty of places that Socrates could go, and despite what Socrates argued in the trial, he would make sure that he's accepted by whoever is there because they're friends of Crito's. Also, he wants to say that giving Socrates giving himself to execution would be unjust. Why would it be unjust? Well, it's because in some ways you'd be helping your enemies. In other words, Socrates would be helping his enemies by allowing himself to be executed. And so that is unjust, according to Crito. Lastly, Socrates' sons need to be raised, and Crito argues that it'd be better if they were raised by Socrates himself. In other words, Socrates has a duty to his sons. So to all of this, Socrates just smiles and says that he commends Crito's zealousness. So zealousness is kind of like a spirited dedication. And so he commends Crito's zealous attempt to save him, but Crito's zeal might be misplaced, says Socrates. Before Socrates can decide to escape or not, he must know whether or not it is true and just that he should escape. So in this, Socrates refuses to act on anything but principle. So he takes Crito's arguments by one in order to answer the question, is it just to escape? Now, it's not put this way in the dialogue, but for now let's just go with this. Is it just for Socrates to escape? Well, he starts off with the opinions. What will people think? Socrates makes a very clever argument here by pointing out that we should only care about the opinions of some people, and not all people, because some opinions are better than others. Specifically, we should care about those that have good opinions and not worry about those that have bad opinions. The good opinions, specifically, are those of experts who have understanding, and there are very few such experts in the world. Now, Socrates, after this, goes down a different path. He says we should prefer living well to living. Because there's no point in living if you're not living well. And by well, he means something like good, not you're enjoying yourself, you have plenty of ice cream cones or something like that. So, living well specifically, this part here, implies living justly. Okay? So the real important question here is not whether or not escaping is... So the real important question here is whether or not escaping is honorable and just. Whether or not, Socrates' sons are going to be fine, or whether or not Crito has the resources, that's irrelevant. The only important question is it just to escape? So Socrates thus begins on this line by asking whether or not Crito agrees that acting unjustly is always bad. So let's clear some space here. Yeah. He asks Crito whether acting unjustly is always bad. Crito says it is, so it's not even a question. It's almost by definition. Acting unjustly is bad. Now, next he asks him another question. Is that the case even if you're doing it in return? And Crito again confirms that yes, acting unjustly is bad even if you're doing it in return. Someone does something bad to you, so you do something bad back to them. That isn't just. And another thing, one should keep their promises. Yes, well, Crito, should one keep their promises? Again, Crito says, yeah, of course. That's not even a question. So, from these things, Socrates concludes that to escape basically means to not follow rules, or in other words, to break his promise to follow rules. And, furthermore, if that's the case, then it is unjust. So to escape is unjust, and therefore not allowed. Now, how exactly is this unjust, and who is it unjust to? Well, it's unjust, Socrates says, to the city of Athens. That's who he agreed with on the rules. And this comes back sort of to our discussion about social contract, back with Mary Midgley. Well, besides breaking a promise to Athens by not following the laws, you're also undermining Athens, because not only are you breaking one law, but in some ways you're encouraging others to also break the laws of Athens. If Socrates can bend the laws whenever he pleases, then so can everyone else, right? So Socrates grew up in Athens. He was educated in Athens. He lived in Athens all his life, and he chose to raise his kids in Athens. So at every step that he could have left Athens because he disagrees with it on some point, he did it. He chose Athens on every step along the way. So in all respects, he chose Athens and chose to agree to its laws. Now, Socrates even had the option to propose exile during his trial so that he would have to leave Athens. But he refused to do so. So now, to escape would be to do without Athens' permission what he could have done back then with Athens' permission. Lastly, if he were to escape, it would in fact hurt his friends' reputations, because his friends would be those who helped him subvert the laws. And not only his friends' reputations, but also his own reputation, because Socrates would then be known as a subverter of the laws. And he wouldn't be welcome in any place that is even relatively civilized, because what is civilization? It is laws. So in every place with laws that he goes to, the people there are going to be questioning, are you going to subvert our laws too? So he says that he cannot accept that. Not only that, but consider this. If Socrates was to escape, then the people looking on would probably think that the judgment against him was true and just. But Socrates knows that the judgment against him wasn't true or just. And so he doesn't want people to make that mistake, to think that he was correctly convicted. By accepting his fate and not escaping, he still leaves it open that the judgment was incorrect. Furthermore, Socrates doesn't want to be a hypocrite. What has he been doing most of his life at this point? He's been going around preaching about the importance of goodness and the laws and understanding them, carefully. And so now, as soon as push came to shove, he's going to break those laws? That would be completely hypocritical. Now, here's a little bit more of a religious argument that he gives. He says that if I break the laws here in Athens, then what will the sister laws in Hades think of me when I get there? So in other words, Socrates is looking forward to his afterlife, and he's expecting, if the afterlife is like a journey, that he will be judged. And if he's going to be judged by a set of laws, he doesn't want to be seen as an enemy to laws. Besides that, and here's where he addresses more particularly his point about the sons, even if he did escape, he wouldn't be able to raise his sons. The two options would be A, he brings his sons with him to some godforsaken, lawless country, or B, he lets them stay there and his friends will raise them. Well, it seems like it's not an option to bring his sons to some godforsaken corner of the earth, so instead, they would stay there. So in either case, whether or not Socrates escapes, his sons would be raised by his friends. So in one fell swoop, Socrates just demolishes all of these arguments that Crito gave him in order to escape. Not only would it hurt reputations, but it would hurt Socrates' relationship to what he thinks is just and true. Socrates can never abandon that, just as he can never abandon philosophy. So he concludes that he must accept his fate and not accept Crito's offer of escape. Well, with that concludes this lecture. Join us next time where we're going to be covering a very famous chapter from Plato's Republic, titled The Supremacy of the Good. See you there.